Ryūjin, deep beneath the Pacific Ocean, according to Shinto tradition, sits a palace made entirely of coral and crystal called Ryūgū-jō, and ruling over it is Ryujin, the dragon king of the sea. He appears either as an enormous dragon or an ancient king, draped in robes the color of deep water, and every sea creature alive answers to him. His most prized possessions are two magical jewels called Kanju and Manju. One raises the tide, the other lowers it, giving him total control over the ocean's rhythm. He is the father of Toyotama Hime, a sea goddess, and his palace appears in one of Japan's most famous myths, the story of Urashima Taro, a fisherman who visits Ryūgū-jō and returns to find centuries have passed on the surface. The Nihon Shoki documents his role in Japanese cosmology, and his reach over the sea is total and absolute. Watatsumi. Before Ryujin became the dominant name for Japan's sea god, there was Watatsumi, whose name translates roughly to great sea being, and whose origins appear in some of the oldest surviving Japanese texts, including the Kojiki and the Nihon Shoki. Scholars note that Watatsumi and Ryujin were originally treated as separate deities, only gradually merging in popular tradition over centuries of retelling. Watatsumi rules his own underwater kingdom, commands sea serpents, and is associated specifically with violent ocean storms, rather than the more regal tide-controlling image of Ryujin. Fishermen and sailors across coastal Japan worshipped him directly, leaving offerings before voyages in the hope that the sea would stay calm beneath them. The gradual blurring of Watatsumi into Ryujin tells you something about how mythology works, two powerful ideas eventually collapsing into one. Kappa. If you were a child living near a Japanese river a few centuries ago, the kappa was the reason your parents told you not to swim alone. It is a child-sized humanoid yokai with scaly green-yellow skin, a turtle shell on its back, webbed hands strong enough to drag a horse underwater, and most critically, a shallow, water-filled dish on top of its head. That dish is the source of all its power, and if it dries out, the kappa is helpless. Despite drowning children and livestock being its preferred hobby, the kappa has one exploitable flaw. It is pathologically polite. Bow to it deeply enough, and it bows back, spilling the water from its head dish and neutralizing it entirely. Some regional legends even describe kappa forming peaceful agreements with humans, teaching them medicinal techniques in exchange for respect. The smell of fish follows it everywhere, and in some areas it is associated with sumo wrestling, which is a combination of facts that somehow makes it more unsettling, not less. Isnade. The waters off the coast of Kyushu in western Japan have their own specific terror, and it doesn't announce itself. The isonade is a shark-like sea yokai documented in Edo period yokai encyclopedias, and its name translates roughly to beach stroker, which does nothing to prepare you for what it actually does. Its body is enormous and almost never seen. What sailors reported was a hook-covered tail that broke the surface just long enough to snag a person off a boat's deck and drag them silently into the ocean. No struggle, no warning, no body. The isonade is also considered an omen. Its presence near a coastline predicts storms and maritime disasters. It is one of the rarer documented sea yokai, which somehow makes it worse, because the folklore offers almost no reliable way to avoid or counter it. Umi-bozu. The umi-bozu rises from perfectly calm water, which is the part that makes Japanese sailors fear calm nights at sea more than rough ones. This yokai is a colossal, black humanoid shape that erupts from the flat ocean surface, so tall in some accounts that it disappears into the clouds above, with two glowing white eyes as the only features on an otherwise featureless dark mass. Its name means sea monk or sea priest, and it is one of the most visually iconic creatures in all of Japanese maritime folklore. Speaking to it, showing fear, or reacting in almost any way tends to accelerate the capsizing of your ship. The one documented survival strategy across multiple regional variants is specific: offer it an empty barrel. According to tradition, The umi-bozu will attempt to pour the entire ocean into it, become distracted, and allow the ship to escape. A barrel with no bottom works best. Ryu. Not every Japanese sea dragon is a king. The Ryu is a category of water dragon found in rivers, lakes, and oceans across Japanese mythology, and they differ from Western dragons in almost every fundamental way. No wings, no fire, and no particular interest in hoarding gold. Instead, they are long, serpentine, and associated with wisdom and divine protection of specific bodies of water. The number of claws matters. 5-clawed Ryu are imperial or divine, while lesser variants carry 3 or 4. Many Ryu are depicted holding a glowing pearl in their claws, which according to tradition represents wisdom or the power to control water. Some shapeshift into human form and live among people undetected. The tradition overlaps significantly with Chinese dragon mythology due to centuries of cultural exchange. But the Japanese Ryu developed its own distinct characteristics. Quieter, more watchful, less concerned with storms, and more with guardianship. Long Wang. In Chinese mythology, the ocean is not one kingdom, but 4, and each is ruled by a dragon king, called a Long Wang. The most powerful rules the East Sea. The others govern the south, west, and north. Each lives in an underwater crystal palace, staffed by shrimp soldiers and crab generals. Which sounds absurd until you realize these beings control rain, floods, drought, and typhoons across the entire continent. Historically, Chinese coastal communities and farmers offered prayers directly to the Dragon Kings during droughts, and temples dedicated to them lined the coastlines for centuries. The East Sea's king, Ao Guang, appears prominently in Journey to the West, where Sun Wukong breaks into his palace and steals the magical iron staff, Ryūjin Bang, an act that sets major portions of that story in motion. The 4 Dragon Kings remain among the most widely recognized figures in Chinese folk religion. Jaolong. Before a dragon becomes a true long in Chinese cosmological tradition, according to some classical texts, it spends time as a jaolong, sometimes translated as flood dragon or horned dragon. The jaolong appears in the Shan Hai Jing, the classic of mountains and seas, one of China's oldest mythological catalogs, and is described as a crocodilian serpent hybrid, long, scaled, and extremely dangerous near water. Jaolong are associated with flooding events, capable of triggering typhoons, and some texts describe them shapeshifting into human form to lure people toward the water. The concept also connects to the Chinese geographical idea of dragon veins, invisible lines of energy running through landscapes, often associated with rivers and coastlines. The Jiaolong sits at the more chaotic, monstrous end of Chinese dragon mythology, before ascension brings wisdom and divine status, Haishe. The Shanhai Jing, compiled roughly between the 4th and 1st centuries BCE, does not describe one sea serpent. It describes dozens, cataloged across different named seas, with the same matter-of-fact precision you'd expect from a field guide. These Haishe, or sea serpents, range from creatures with multiple heads, to fire-producing variants, to serpents described as large enough to encircle entire islands. They are not gods. They are simply what lives in the deep water, treated as natural phenomena as much as supernatural ones. Citing certain varieties is recorded as an omen, predicting floods, wars, or the collapse of a ruling dynasty, depending on which specific serpent appeared and where. The sheer variety documented across the Shan Hai Jing's sea entries reflects just how seriously ancient Chinese cosmology took the ocean as a place of genuine, catalogable terror. Mazu. Mazu is unusual among the creatures on this list because she started as a real person. According to Chinese folk tradition, she was born Lin Mo in Fujian province in 960 CE, a girl who reportedly fell into a trance while her father and brothers were out fishing in a storm and guided their boats home through sheer concentration, though she lost her grip when her mother woke her and one brother drowned. She died young, around 987 CE, and was almost immediately venerated as a protective spirit by local fishing communities. Her cult spread along the entire Chinese coastline, then across Southeast Asia with Chinese diaspora communities. She's said to appear as a red-robed woman, walking calmly across the surface of stormy water, guiding ships to safety. UNESCO recognized her tradition as intangible cultural heritage in 2009, and today she has an estimated 200 million worshippers and over 1,500 temples worldwide, making her one of the most actively venerated sea deities on Earth. Naga. Few mythological creatures have traveled as far or embedded themselves as deeply as the Naga, the divine serpent beings found across Hindu, Buddhist, and virtually every Southeast Asian religious tradition. They range from fully serpentine to half-human with a cobra hood spreading behind a human head, and they rule underwater kingdoms called Nagaloka. In Buddhist tradition, a seven-headed Naga named Mukalinda sheltered the Buddha from a storm by coiling beneath him and spreading its hood as a canopy, a story documented in the Pali Canon. In Cambodia, the founding myth of the Khmer royal dynasty involves a king marrying a Naga princess, and Cambodian royal lineage has claimed Naga ancestry ever since. Across Thailand, Laos, and parts of India, Naga are associated with rain, rivers, fertility, and the spiritual power of deep water. The carvings on the entrance bridges of Angkor Wat are Naga balustrades. You walk between their bodies to enter sacred space. Makara. The makara is Hindu mythology's great hybrid, and it appears absolutely everywhere. Carved onto temple doorways, depicted in Vedic astronomical texts, mounted beneath the feet of gods. It is typically described as having the head of a land animal, most often an elephant or a deer, fused to the rear half of a fish or sea serpent, and the specific combination varies by region and era. Varuna, the god of cosmic waters, rides one as his vahana, his divine vehicle. Ganga, goddess of the Ganges River, also rides one. Kamadeva, the god of love, carries a makara on his banner. In Vedic astrology, the makara gives its name and imagery to the zodiac sign Capricorn. Its carvings appear not only across India, but at Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and across temple architecture throughout Indonesia, carried along trade and pilgrimage routes over centuries. Timingila. Ancient Indian cosmological texts were not subtle about what they believed lived in the deepest parts of the ocean. The Mahabharata describes the Timingila, a fish so enormous that it swallows whales whole, and in Sanskrit, Timi already means a creature of whale-like scale, making the Timingila literally the thing that eats the whale-eater. Some Puranic texts escalate further, describing a Timingila, a creature that swallows even the Timingila, stacking scale onto scale in a way that communicates something specific. The deep ocean has no bottom to its terror, and human comprehension has no floor either. The Timingila is not a character with a story. It does not interact with gods or heroes in any memorable narrative. It simply exists in the texts as an anchor for the idea that the ocean contains things so large that every other fact about the sea becomes trivial. Abkallu. Around 3,000 years ago in ancient Mesopotamia, modern-day Iraq and Syria, a tradition was already fully formed describing 7 divine sages who rose from the sea to teach humanity everything worth knowing. These were the Abkallu, and the Babylonian priest Berossus described them in his 3rd century BCE work. Babyloniaca as human in form but covered in fish scales, or alternatively, as fish with human heads emerging from their mouths. The most famous individual was Owans, who according to Berossus rose from the Persian Gulf each morning to instruct humans in writing, law, agriculture, and crafts, then returned to the sea each night. Their imagery, a human figure draped in a fish skin, appears carved into the walls of Assyrian palaces. Scholars widely consider the Abkallu tradition to be among the oldest documented sea creature mythologies in recorded human history, predating most others on this list by 1,000 years or more. Bakunawa. In the Visayan tradition of the Philippines, the moon used to come in a set of 7, and a colossal sea serpent ate 6 of them. The Bakunawa is described as enormous, beyond easy comprehension, blue-green, with a mouth wide enough to swallow the moon whole, a red tongue, and whiskers trailing behind its head as it rises from the ocean. According to tradition, the gods eventually intervened to stop it consuming the last moon, but the Bakunawa never stopped trying. Every lunar eclipse, according to this mythology, is another attempt. Spanish colonial-era observers recorded that Visayan communities responded to eclipses by making as much noise as possible, beating pots, shouting, playing instruments, to frighten the Bakunawa back into the sea and force it to release the moon. The practice was documented as recently as the 19th century. 7 moons, 6 gone, 1 left. Naga Padoha. The Batak people of North Sumatra have a straightforward explanation for why their island shakes so often, and it lives at the bottom of everything. In Batak cosmology, the entire world rests on the back of Naga Padoha, an immense sea serpent coiled in the primordial ocean beneath creation. When the creator deity first established the world, Naga Padoha struggled against it, and the deity drove a divine sword through the serpent to pin it in place. But pinned is not the same as still. Every time Naga Padoha writhes or shifts its coils, the earth above trembles. Sumatra sits directly above the Sunda megathrust fault, one of the most seismically active zones on the planet, a geological fact the Batak people had no way of measuring, but had apparently found a mythological language to describe long before modern science arrived to confirm it. Funayure. The Japanese have a specific category of ghost for people who drowned at sea, and these are not the kind that haunt houses. The Funayure, whose name means ship ghost, are the waterlogged spirits of the drowned who return to the ocean surface at night to pull the living down with them. Not out of malice exactly, but out of a kind of grim logic. They drowned, and now so should you. They rise pale and soaking from the dark water, reaching for oars and hull planks. Their signature move, documented consistently across Edo period yokai texts, is to hand a ladle to sailors. Any sailor who accepts it will find their ship filling with seawater almost immediately. The documented countermeasure is specific. Keep a ladle with the bottom removed on board. The Funayure hands it over. The water pours straight through, and the ship survives. It is mythology operating like an instruction manual. Lotan. Before the Hebrew Leviathan, there was Lotan, and before Lotan, there were clay tablets. The Ugaritic texts, discovered at Ras Shamra in modern-day Syria, dated by scholars to approximately 1400 to 1200 BCE, describe a 7-headed sea dragon named Lotan, who serves the chaotic forces of the primordial ocean against the storm god Baal. Baal defeats it, and ordered creation becomes possible. Scholars have documented a direct linguistic and thematic link between Lotan and the Leviathan of the Hebrew Bible. The names are cognate, the imagery nearly identical, the narrative role of chaos serpent defeated by divine force the same. The Ugaritic texts make Lotan one of the earliest multi-headed sea monsters in all of recorded world mythology, placing this tradition comfortably among the oldest on this list. The pattern it represents, a serpent of the deep that must be defeated before the world can function, appears independently across almost every mythology covered here, which suggests it is describing something true about how humans have always understood the sea. If you want to see more, click the video on screen now.